Hello, welcome to latest edition of Data in the Hallway. My name is Ray Pake, Community Manager at PingCAP, joined by my co-host Daniel, who's traveling in Europe this week. Thanks for joining, Daniel. And I have a very exciting topic that I first learned about several years ago, this field called citizen science. Very honored to have two guests, Laura Trouille, who's a VP of Science Engineering at Adler Planetarium, and Zach Wolfenbarger, who's an infrastructure engineer. It's good to have you. Thanks for joining us from Chicago, where Adler is located. So,
Thanks for having us.
yeah. So I don't know if how many of our audience or listeners are familiar with citizen science. I mean, either one of you can start. Tell us what is citizen science, and if you can provide some examples of what some of the projects are like, and what people try to do through citizen science projects. So,
yeah, for sure. I can start off, which is citizen science is all about meaningful engagement in real research by the public. And so there's lots of different citizen science opportunities. Like citizenscience.gov lists over 500 different ones just in the US alone, from going to your local river and doing water monitoring, or being part of the iNaturalist platform, which is using your phone to take pictures when different things are flowering. Project Budburst is like catching the blooms of plants so that you're seeing climate change impacts. eBird. And then there's Zooniverse, but it's lots of different ways where anybody with no expertise, no specific background needed, can get involved in meaningful ways in real research. And then the key is these data sets are then used, whether local, national, or global scales, to move knowledge forward, to impact policy, to make change in some way.
Cool. Yeah, I live near Monterey Bay, and my parents who actually lived near Chicago, they came to visit me. This is years ago, and then we did what they call a safari, and then we went on this boat ride, and they asked for a volunteer. They gave us clickers, like we're counting how many sea otters we saw, like how many certain kinds of species of bird that we saw. So obviously we're not scientists. I'm not a marine biologist, but it's easy enough to count. In this trip, X miles long, I saw X number of sea otters, which was pretty cool. And I don't know how they use that data, but I think that's a good example. And that we didn't get paid for this. We're just asked, we're just taking part in the safari. So,
that's fantastic. Yeah. And it's also in our society today, there can feel like there's such a divide between those who do science and those who don't, or trust in science. And so for us involved in these participatory science projects, it's also trying to lower those barriers and lift the veil on the process of science, and just help bridge those gaps between general public and the ways that we learn about our world and the universe around us.
Right. And the types of projects, we talked about, some scientific projects, but I'll ask you about Zooniverse in a second. But if you go to your website, it's not just a medical or a physical science. There are a history-based projects. I remember years ago I saw they wanted volunteers to help transcribe some of the historical handwritten documents from the Civil War, because cursive writing is becoming a lost art. A lot of kids these days don't know how to read cursive writing. So it was important to, I think it was some of them were draft notes from the Civil War. They wanted to transcribe people's name, et cetera, et cetera. So it was, I think there were a lot of fascinating projects that people can probably find and contribute to. So.
Very much. Yeah. On zooniverse.org or zooniverse.org/projects. At any given time, there's about 80 active projects. And since we started back in 2007 or 2009, depending on the start date, we've launched over 450. And so we have a ton of projects, and it's classifying galaxies, finding planets around distant stars, but also, like you were saying, transcribing historic documents, marking the structure of cells for cancer research, tagging penguins.
Wow.
I'm an astronomer in my background, but
Mhm,
people have a ton of different interests. And so you might come in from a ecology project where you're tagging, elephants
mhm.
in the Serengeti, but then you hear about an astronomy project and that sparks a new interest, or you get into the history through the transcription. There's just a
Okay,
lot to offer across a lot of different interests and areas.
right. I
And
mean,
do
this is a
people,
pretty broad question. Like, how are these like projects like typically organized? I mean, I'm envisioning like there's a researcher at a university, wants to start a project, and they probably don't have enough budget to hire staff to do a lot of sampling work, for example. Is that like I'm guessing that's one of the ways how projects get started, but are there other types of projects as well? Or
Yeah, it's each
mm,
project is led by a different research team. This is on our
mm,
Zooniverse platform. And
mm,
so, you know, part of our origin story is group of astronomers had a million galaxy data set. And it
mm,
wasn't so much driven by budget, but more time scale. So they
mm,
realized, to classify all these galaxies, just to say this is spiral, elliptical, or emerging galaxy, it would take more than their professional lifetimes as a group of, a small, less than
right.
a dozen research team. And so, back in 2007, Angry Birds was pretty popular. They were like,
Right.
well, what if
Right.
we put this data online and harness the power of the crowd to unlock this data set? Like, how quickly
Mm,
could they do it? And can we get the quality of data we need? And so
mhm,
Galaxy Zoo launched in 2007. In the first year, 150,000 people participated, contributed
mhm,
millions of classifications, and was this proof of concept of like, oh yeah, the public loves this. It was so fun.
mhm,
And because every image is classified by many people, and so like 45 people classified each galaxy, and you could have confidence that when 44 out of 45 say, hey, that's a spiral galaxy, and then
mhm,
nowadays we also have machine learning integrated into it and really robust methods to make sure we're getting quality data from the crowd.
mhm.
Crowd gets it right, quality of data, public engagement, all these beautiful things came out of it.
Okay.
But yeah, always
Yeah.
it's a research team, some kind of data set that they know that they can engage the public by making the task as accessible and approachable as possible. And then
Mhm.
unlocking that data with the public and having a talk, like online discussion forum to be able to talk about the research and really engage beyond the classification task.
Cool.
oh,
Cool.
people don't have to be in the US to participate. Like everyone can participate, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
there's
Great.
2.7 million people around the world who engage in Zooniverse projects, or 2.7 million registered participants so far. So for the listeners, go on and sign up and be the next person. But the
Right.
split is like 50%, or about half are US based right now, about 15, 20% are based in the UK, and then the rest from around the world. Major other participators are in Germany and India, Canada, Australia. But it's fun because we have people in Antarctica, in Iceland, in
Oh,
Malaysia,
wow.
just all over,
Yeah.
practically every country participating in this project. And I love that sort of, one world, one sky, the global participation in something meaningful and collective impact.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was like one of the main similarities I saw between open source projects and citizen science. They're like all these like a volunteer. I mean, maybe workforce is not an appropriate term. Like this global community that believe in this big mission, like unlocking the mystery of
Mhm.
the universe, for example, right? Or want to help preserve the ocean, and they're just come together in a common bond, and they're not doing it for like any sorts of financial rewards, right? They're just driven by mission, and I thought that was really really interesting. I mean, we talked about Zooniverse a few times, and I'll be sure to list the URL so people can find projects and join in the episode description. But tell us, yeah, a little bit about like the origin stories and where you are today.
Yeah, so like
Yeah.
I said, started with that one project, Galaxy Zoo, in 2007. And
Mm,
then pretty soon after, an ecology team based at University of Minnesota in the Lion Research Center said, oh,
mm,
you have a million galaxies. We have a million images of the Serengeti Desert. what happens if we do something similar? So at the time, we were a very small web, like one web developer. So they built the next project, Snapshot Serengeti, launched it, and in the first weekend, 3 million classifications, processed a backlog of 18 months of data. It was just an amazing, start to that, one of the next early projects on the platform. A big game changer was in 2015, or leading up to that, we had a Sloan Foundation grant and a Google Global Impact Award, and it allowed us to build what we call the Project Builder platform. So now, rather than our small team of web devs building a custom project for each new team, it was this simple browser-based tools. You just drag and drop your data, set the task, and immediately see what the public will see. So that launched in 2015, and we went from building about 3 projects a year, custom built, to launching about 40 to 50 new projects a year, where the research team or whoever had the data would build the project using the Project Builder tools. So yeah, 2007 was our start. 2015 was a big sort of acceleration of the Zooniverse, and then just, flying from there.
Cool. So how big of a staff do you have at Zooniverse, like helping with various aspects of these projects?
Yeah, this question touches on sort of the structure of our team. So we have 3 main homes for the Zooniverse internal team: the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, University of Minnesota, and Oxford University in the UK. And when we have our Zooniverse team meetings where we all get together, it's about 20 people total, with a little over half that are the actual web developers, infrastructure engineers like Zach and our designer, and then the other half are researchers internal to our team, or people like me who serve as project liaisons, helping other teams use these tools.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So at least very naturally to the next set of questions, since Zach is on, wanted to talk about, since we're a database company, we're interested in how people collect data, what kind of data that you're working with, and sort of the infrastructure. So, Zach, tell us about what kind of infrastructure that you have, and how you help support all these research projects.
Sure. So you mentioned the open source community and sort of the citizen science community, and Zooniverse really sits at the intersection of that. So we are all of our code is open source, and we live in the cloud. So infrastructure wise, we run an Azure AKS Kubernetes cluster with anywhere from 6 to 8 VMs underneath that at any time, given scaling. Database wise, in terms of our data, we have a primary Postgres database that stores most of our like classification information, user information, and all that kind of stuff. That's about, I don't know, size-wise, maybe 1.5 terabytes, 2 terabytes. So it's small to medium data, I guess, rather than big data. And we do, for instance, all of our CI/CD and DevOps work through GitHub. So I mentioned that we are open source, and we do most of our work on GitHub. So very transparent in that way, and our testing and deployment are all managed via GitHub Actions. As far as the kind of data that we store, first thing to note, I guess, is that Zooniverse is an open platform. Laura mentioned the Project Builder a moment ago. That enables anyone to come and create an account with the Zooniverse and build a project. And so there is no barrier to the Project Builder or anything like that. So you could try it yourself right now if you wanted to. That's also true for uploading data, what we call subjects, which are just sort of the discrete units of, a single picture of a bunch of penguins, or a picture of a galaxy, or a single letter, or a page of a letter, things like that. And so the data that we manage is in that format, and in terms of like the binary stuff that we keep in like our blob storage, it's mostly those subject images that people upload to us, and then that we serve in the form of like the classification interface. The classification interface will vary depending on the type of task that you're doing, whether you're typing a transcription or you are just naming the shape of a galaxy or typing in a number. But the type of data that we mostly manage is that part, what we call classifications or annotations, the part of the user input part. And so we have somewhere between, depending on how many databases you count, somewhere between 500 million and 750 million annotations, classifications that we store. And like I said, that can be as straightforward as just like a yes or no, or it can be an entire page worth of text. So yeah, and that data is what is used eventually by our researchers to by the researchers that we work with to answer whatever question that they set out to answer.
Okay, so once like data is sort of like input into your platforms or ingested, like do researchers also do like analytics on the platforms that you manage, or is that like done separately?
Both,
Okay.
really. We export sort of a raw data format to whoever needs that. We also have a number of sort of data processing and aggregation tools that we can provide in varying degrees of automation that will allow our volunteers, or rather our researchers, to like process that data offline, aggregate it, from a big CSV to a slightly littler CSV that gives a consensus value. For instance, like if 6 out of 10 or 6 out of 7 people say that this is this, then we will provide a sort of consensus value based on whatever type of question was being asked. But then there are also more automated systems. We have like orchestration tools that will read sort of data streams out of like that are published by our API and pushed out to be consumed by these orchestration tools that then can make decisions based on that information coming in live. So for instance, if a subject has been seen enough times, or if an automated tool is set up to do this, it can say, okay, that subject can be retired. We can remove that from the pool of subjects that will serve because we are confident that we know the answer for that one. Or if we want to forward that data on, or once that happens, there can be an effect that says, oh, now we want to forward this data on to an external API, an external provider, that sort of thing. So it's both. It depends a lot on both the requirements and the sort of technical capacity of each individual research team, but those tools are available to everyone. It just sort of depends on how closely we're working with any given group.
Yeah. I mean, it won't be a technology podcast unless we talk about AI or ML these days. But I think, Laura, you already kind of mentioned it earlier. But so how would that sort of fit into like, projects in the future, whether it's like a new solutions or, how would they be used to help researchers with their projects at Zooniverse?
Well, historically, I think that we've used machine learning kind of all along in order to process data.
Right.
One of our core sort of tenets is we want to make the most of our volunteers' time. And so any opportunity that we have to minimize the wasted time, we will. So for instance, if we can use machine learning to pre-process a data set and remove, for instance, blank images and things like that. But I do think that machine learning has been more and more the focal point of a lot of grants.
Mhm.
Maybe Laura can speak to that.
Yeah, and right now about a quarter of our projects have machine learning integrated in some way. Whether, like Zach said, it's a pre-processing, or sometimes it's humans in the loop where the humans and machines are classifying the data sort of alongside each other, and there's some active learning where the machine knows, oh, I need these particular types of subject sets to really get to the next level of quality. And so we will even sometimes, in a few experiments with some projects, we know who's good at what types of classifications
Mhm.
or subject types. And so we'll send particular people that type of data, and then the machine gets that
Mhm.
back because it needs it to
Right.
take the next step. There's fascinating experiments. I mean, you all know modern science is characterized by like data deluge. So
Right.
one of the next astronomy telescopes coming online, 40 terabytes of data every single night will be captured.
Oh, wow.
And every night, a million objects of interest. And so the astronomy community already has machine learning sort of integrated into their pipelines, but also the data that's going to flow to Zooniverse projects like finding supernova, classifying galaxies. We will additionally, those research teams will have the ML integrated into it. And then the thing to note is, because we care a lot about the participants' experience, but also about AI literacy, and it's this really great sandbox to help the public better understand in a research
Mhm.
context, what is this interplay between humans and machines, and how do we make sure the design of the experience is still a good, enjoyable, rewarding and enriching experience for the humans in the loop. So we're
Right.
doing a lot of different experiments and tests and feedback from our participants to make sure that this integration doesn't take away from their experience, and that it's
Mhm.
open, transparent, clear what we're doing, what the researchers are doing, and how they're using these data.
Right. Cool. So that's great. So, I mean, Zach, you mentioned obviously, you probably use a lot of like open source technologies and projects. I mean, as you move forward, I mean, both you and Laura, are there something that you'd like to see from technology vendors or other open source communities to help you with your work?
Yeah, so the
Uh,
Zooniverse is built on open source. Basically
mhm.
everything that we do is built on open source and is then open sourced by us.
Mhm.
So as far as things that I would like to see, speaking about like ML and AI, I don't know that this is directly applicable, but
Mhm.
we have a uh, in our sort of DevOps infrastructure, we have a chatbot named Lita who's been with us for a long time, but she's getting on in years. I think that one thing that I would love to see is a new sort of platform agnostic chatbot that can
Mhm.
be extended and programmed that would plug into things like GitHub and Slack that is a little less, that would be a little less fragile than dear sweet Lita right now, and would allow me to build a system by which I could engage with our CI/CD infrastructure
Mm.
in a more natural way, but also to open that
Right.
up to our other developers and the team at large. It's kind of surprising to me that there doesn't seem to be like at least that I've found. Please hit me up if you're aware of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But a good option for a DevOps oriented chatbot. I think that would be sweet.
Okay. Cool.
I'd add on my end, because we're a good sized team, but we're a small team supporting this like very
Mm.
sophisticated big infrastructure. And so when we're using libraries or other open source tools, the maintenance of those, the
Mhm.
support of those, and then if something is going to sunset, a good pathway and support in terms of what could become a replacement, and that because those kinds of changes can be huge, become critical periods for us, and cause us a lot of work. um,
It can be
and then
very
the one that
disruptive.
can be
Yeah.
very disruptive. And then the one
Yeah.
other is because we have millions of people around the world, participating in this type of effort. And we're in the business of like sparking interest and excitement about STEM. And a lot of our younger participants then go on into these fields. So it is the continued encouragement of good, welcoming cultures and inclusive cultures, across the tech fields. And it's starting to change. And I even see it among our own developers. And when they go to conferences, how they feel welcomed, because we work with quite a diverse group of devs. But continuing that momentum and that thoughtful practices in terms of the community and how it welcomes in people from diverse backgrounds and experiences and perspectives.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good call to action for all of the society. I think it's the way that we need to be mindful of differences and making sure that everybody feels comfortable. It's an enormous task. And I mean, for example, in open source, we've been talking about it since like early 2010s. It's getting better, I think, over the last dozen years, but we still have a long ways to go. And both my father and my wife, they're in academia, and then I hear about the similar challenges there too. So yeah, but yeah, it's something that we all should strive for. So cool. Well, I mean, thanks for giving us a good tour of citizen science and Zooniverse. And for listeners, I encourage you to just check out the Zooniverse website. It's actually pretty cool. The number of different projects you have and how you can contribute. And unless you're really like, I don't know, jaded for some reason, you'll probably find something that actually at least piques your interest. But so cool. So we have a tradition here, like a final trivia question that we ask all our guests. I mean, both of you are in Chicago. I think you're the first guest from Chicago. As I mentioned earlier, my parents live near Chicago. It's a city that I'm pretty familiar with it. Although it's a big city, I don't think I know every corner of downtown Chicago, for example. Tell us something about, I mean, I think a lot of people probably either visited or know about Chicago, but tell us something about Chicago that a lot of people may not know.
Zach, you want to go first?
No, you go ahead. I'm not sure. I'm just
gotcha. Happy to. So first, come check out our beautiful gem of a museum, the Adler Planetarium on the lakefront. We have the best view of the city, and then the best view of the stars in the sky above. Amazing planetarium shows, exhibits, and if you live in Chicago, they have a really robust youth engagement program. So all the things that we're doing online with Zooniverse, we also do in person in terms of accessible, hands-on, real research with young people, and it's just transforming young people's trajectories and lives. So check out Adler Planetarium in Chicago.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it's near the Field Museum, right? Is that correct?
Or there's a whole museum campus. The Shedd Aquarium, the Field Museum, and the Adler Planetarium. Chicago's rich in cultural institutions.
I think a lot of people are familiar with like a field museum. That I think that's better known. But I was going to say it's a great location. Soldier Field is right there, another historical building, especially if you're a sports fan. So yeah, even in the winter, like I walk through there when it's very windy, but it's a nice area. So cool. Yeah, thanks for that. It's a good reminder that lots of good places to visit.
Lots of good places to eat too. Chicago's a great city. Oh, and one thing that I'll mention also is that I don't remember exactly when it is, but the next RubyConf. So our is in Chicago. Our primary API is written in Ruby and Rails, and so myself and my colleagues have occasionally gone to Ruby conferences and Rails conferences, and I believe that the next RubyConf is here in Chicago. So if you find yourself on museum campus, I recommend 12th Street Del Tacos. They have excellent al pastor, but I'm also, hit me up for more restaurant recommendations.
There are no shortage of good restaurants in Chicago. I have to agree. So I do, like every time I go there, although I go probably a couple of times a year, there are certain spots that I always make sure that I go before I come home. So including a Chicago style hot dog. So yeah. Cool. Well, thanks very much. And I mean, maybe next time I'm in Chicago, I'll bring my daughter to the planetarium. I'll try to look you folks up. So I'll give you a
Please
heads
do.
up. So, cool.
Definitely
And
do.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And Danielle, safe travels. Like it's no fun trying to get back home Friday afternoon, Friday evening. But all right. Well, thanks very much. I'll see you folks later.
Thanks for having us. See
Yeah.
you at
Thank you.
zooniverse.org.
Yeah. Thanks. That's right.
Thank you.